Welcome to the EarthWorks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Simmons, and this is the EarthWorks podcast. I'm very excited to have Andrew Siegel here today, who is the sports turf manager for Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas, or TCU. And Andrew, thank you so much. I've been bugging you for I don't know how long to get you on this, and now that you're at home on an ice day, this works out perfect for us, doesn't it?
Yeah, Joel, glad to be here. I'm glad we could get everything set up on the laptop in the office, also known as the Lego room at my house.
I like it. I can see a lot of, for those of you watching on YouTube, there's a lot. Is that all Legos behind you on the shelf?
There's Legos, there's bobbleheads, there's baseball, sports memorabilia. It's kind of
Oh my goodness,
the jack of all trades room for myself and the kids.
How many kids do you have?
We have two.
Wow.
6-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy.
You're busy, aren't you?
Always. It's
so we were talking earlier. I mean, this is being recorded in early February, and in Texas, in Dallas in particular, you guys have been having a lovely stretch of weather, some ice, and you guys just don't know how to handle this stuff, do you?
You know, well, first I will. People in Fort Worth get really upset when people call Fort Worth Dallas.
Sorry about that.
I don't really care. I'm from Houston, so it's not a big deal for me. But yeah, in the Metroplex, we get one of these big storms a year, it almost seems like. And sometimes we'll go without them. And this year, it wasn't so much snow as it was sleet, freezing rain. And there's just not enough infrastructure and trucks, to brine all the roads and sand everything. And then people think just because I have a 4-wheel drive vehicle, I can get out and drive on it. And then it's just all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, because nobody knows how to drive on that. I've been watching the YouTube videos of everybody in that Metroplex area of the trucks going off. Oh, yeah. And, being in the Northeast, we're used to this, although we've been at 50 degrees for the last, from pretty much this whole winter. So you guys are getting it worse than we are, actually.
Yeah, we right before Christmas, we got down to about 10 degrees for about 24 hours. We happened to have a football game that day, and it was miserable. It was miserable. And then we were right back up to 65 Christmas.
Wow. Yeah. So that's just nuts. And again, it's not something you guys are used to. Let me get into Andrew. Give me some background as to how you got into this business. I know you went to A&M. Did you go for turf?
No. Growing up, I knew that's where I always wanted to end up for school. Life school as a 6-year-old. Yep, was to end up at A&M, and then after that, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I finished high school. I loved sports as a kid. I played baseball, but I played basketball through high school. Obviously, got to college. That was done, and I went to sporting events everywhere I could think of, while having no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Thought it was construction of some sort. Realized I had to take calculus. I knew that wasn't going to happen after not passing.
It's screwed up a lot of us, hasn't it? Calculus.
Yeah. Yep. Nor college. So then it was just, what can I get by without having to take calculus?
Yes, exactly.
And one of my good friends that I grew up with was an engineering major and said, "Hey, why don't you take this recreational turf class with me as a elective?" So I said, "Sure, why not?" So I jumped in, and agronomy 302 by Google was the class. And I remember sitting down there the first day thinking, I can get paid to go work in shorts and a t-shirt and watch sports all day.
Yeah.
I said, what? Sign me up. And so at the time, Leo Gertz was the head sports turf manager at A&M. His assistant Craig Potts were there, and they'd been there for years. And so I found out that they actually hired students to work during the season. And so I went and started in right after my sophomore year, which was the summer of 2005, making $5.15 an hour.
Ooh.
And man, it was great. Best summer of my life.
Wore shorts all day, didn't you?
Yeah, shorts, t-shirts, sweating. That first year, I got to see a new baseball and softball field built. We got to do a little hands-on work with it. And so after that, I declared my major. I'll never forget telling my parents, my dad, who was an optometrist, going, "I just sent you to college to be a gardener?" And I said, "No, I'm not going to be a gardener." And, then I got the typical dad response, "Well, have you thought this through? Are you going to be able to make a living doing this?" And I said, well, Dad, I said, what are, a few things that we can guarantee in life? And he went through, death and taxes. And I
Yeah,
said,
there
well,
you go.
good. Since people are dying all the time, where do they get buried? I can always take care of a cemetery if I have to. And he said, wow, apparently you've thought through this.
You're trying to sell your dad on working at a cemetery. There
I mean,
you go.
hey, it's stable work and somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, there's
And
always
so,
somebody coming, right? There's always
right.
people there.
And that was when he told me that, hey, when I die, I'm going to be cremated. And I said, well, most people want to be dumped on green grass when they're cremated too, Dad. So that's how that's what got me into it. And then so I worked there for 3 years as a student. For those guys, I did an internship in Oklahoma City. It was then the Rangers AAA baseball affiliate. They were the Red Hawks. I think now they're with the Dodgers or some sort.
Yeah.
So I spent the summer of 2007 up there. Upon graduation in 2008, I stayed on at A&M working full time for them and took care of the baseball field on a regular basis through the spring of 2011. At that point in time, my wife now was in Dallas. And so I was looking to move on, knowing that there was going to be no upward movement there.
Right.
And a couple of things kind of fell through in the sports side. So I jumped over to golf and did golf from, I think it was June of 2011 through October of 2012. At that point in time, another person I'd met in the industry, Tom Burns, called me and said, hey, UT Arlington down the road, look keeper. They've never had anybody. Coaches take care of it. Interested? And I said, yes. And he said, well, what would your price be? And at that point I said, don't tell them, but I don't really care. I just got to get out of golf.
I just got to get off this thing.
I was like, I got to get out of golf. And it wasn't just any golf course. It was a municipality. And so there were on how we could operate. And I was just ready to get back into the sports side of things. So
were you really in love with the sports side of it all?
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up, like, I love baseball. I don't play golf. So at that point, golf course superintendents and greenskeepers love golf. They could get off and go play around as soon as they're done.
Yeah. And they should.
I just couldn't wait to, I just couldn't wait to get out of there at the end of the day. Everybody that came through was a critic and knew your job better than you did. And it was just, it wasn't for me. I was just used to having coaches and ball players. Only 20 to 25 people tell me that I was bad at my job, not hundreds.
Not everybody that comes through with a set of clubs that can't hit the ball straight. Yeah.
Yep. So
that's a great story.
Yeah. So I jumped back over there and started that program from scratch. We had baseball and softball, really old native soil fields. Kind of got that rolling, designed a new softball field. We got that built in 2014 while I was there. And at the time, it was just me and whatever former baseball player students I could round up to help. It was usually myself and two or three other guys running back and forth doing both of them.
And probably on a pretty limited financial budget, I'm guessing.
Yes, definitely. But we made do. We kind of just didn't know what we didn't have, I guess you could say, at the time. And so you just kind of did what you could do. And it was nice because kind of the best they ever had. So nobody ever really complained. Everything was better than it had been. And the coaches weren't having to do it themselves. So then they also couldn't complain, because they weren't having to be the ones there early in the morning to get ready for practices or clean up post game. We had it and kind of took care of it with some of the players' help and whatnot.
Now, I'm sorry. Remind me again. The facility is where?
University of Texas at Arlington. So it's about halfway between Dallas and Fort Worth. It's a commuter school. They don't like it, but called the commuter school.
No, nobody likes that phrase.
There's, I don't know, I'd probably say 34 students. It was a smaller. It's a big school, but as far as athletic departments are concerned, it's small. Most people haven't heard of it because they don't have football, and the basketball program hasn't been great. But historically, pretty decent in baseball, and okay in softball while we were there. And so during that time, I met a few other people, and TCU would happen to host regionals for baseball. And at the time, they had turf managers, but they didn't have anybody that was taking care of the skinned areas for their baseball field. It was usually the coaches. And so when they had these tournaments for the first round of the NCAA play, the coaches couldn't do it. So they would bring me in and I'd bring some of my guys. And so I got to know people. The first one I did was in 2015, did another one in 17. And then at the end of 17, decided they wanted to bring in a new full-time sports turf manager. and kind of update the thinking process they had going around that. My predecessor had been there for a while, was probably getting closer to retirement. And so they kind of wanted a new, fresh idea on how they were going to do things. So I interviewed, probably say December of 17, I think. And then I started in April of 18. And here we are, almost 5 years later now.
Wow. So you got there right before COVID too, right?
I did. So we had, what, 2 years before COVID, I guess?
Yeah,
Something
well,
like that.
yeah,
Football season.
20. Yeah, so 18 to 20. Yeah.
There was a whole lot crammed into that time too. You don't know it at the time, but there was there was a lot of things that were crammed in.
I think I'd been there a couple of times and we talked about it, and you were a busy man for quite a while. And then of course COVID hit, and I didn't come back down because of COVID. But I remember when we first met, when you got there, you were one of the busiest guys I knew in the business. You were doing all sorts of fun things. Let me go back to the first job. So you basically are coming out of the golf course, obviously. I mean, I love the story because, so many guys that I talk to, have done both golf and sports. So you might be one of the more adamant about, I want out of golf. Which is kind of funny, and it's perfect for what you do, and you certainly are the quintessential sports turf guy. But so that first job you've got no people, you got to design. You were designing the softball field. Is that what?
Yeah. So when I got there, there's two native soil ball fields on baseball that were just plopped down right next to each other. I want to say the baseball field was built in the 80s. And I don't even remember when the softball field was built. The walls were all metal. It was like sheet metal painted green.
Yeah.
It had probably like 60% slope drop off behind home plate turf area down just so it could drain. I mean, I'm surprised nobody broke their leg falling back behind there.
Yeah, really.
When it was rain, it was mush. It was awful. And so the athletic director at the time, one of his goals was to upgrade the facilities. And I'll never forget the first time I stepped foot on campus. I walked up and I was like, oh, this is a nice looking facility. And you walk in and there's just a giant brick wall surrounding the fields with bathrooms, but there's no locker rooms, no offices, anything there. And it was just kind of a facade.
Really?
And so all of the athletes would have to go, a quarter of a mile up the road to the track stadium where their locker rooms were to change clothes. And it was almost dumbfounding. And use the bathroom. So, I had no office. We had just had sheet metal sheds where everything was stored. And so one of his goals was to upgrade the facilities. And that included locker rooms and offices for the coaches and players there, and a whole new facility for softball, which it needed.
Maintenance facilities, is that what you're saying? A place for you guys?
What's that?
A maintenance facility?
No, not even really. Just a place for teams to dress, shower.
Okay. So more for the athletes and
for the athletes. Yeah, they built batting cages were part of it. They each got a new indoor batting cage. So they did a lot of. And then one of those I talked them into was like, we really have to do something about the softball. Just flat out not safe. I wouldn't want my kid playing on it at a rec. So that was one of the big things. So from there we went and got through the design process, the interviews with different contractors and that whole thing, and then built it from the ground up, demo and build.
Well, let me ask you this, because I'm always intrigued, when somebody in the industry starts a new job. I mean, you have some limited experience. I mean, you got your degree, I assume, by that, and gone through that, worked at the school at A&M for a while. But now you're thrown into a position where you're the boss. I mean, and I mean, no disrespect here, so don't take it this way, but did you know what you were doing? I mean, when you walked in there, was it frightening? Was it a little nerve-wracking? Or what advice would you give to somebody in that same position? Because it's got to be tough going from, kind of a cold start into a job that you're now taking over.
It's one of those things. I think we're blessed when we don't know what we don't know.
Exactly. Yes. Ignorance is bliss. Yes.
Ignorance was bliss. I want to say I was probably 24, 25 at the time.
Yeah.
And if I was even that old, I might have even been 23. And so I thought I knew exactly what I was doing when I got in there.
Of course you did.
And,
of course you did.
And you just kind of little by little figure it out, and you kind of learn what issues there are while you're at it. And start uncovering things. And so I think, I didn't go in on day one just nervous. I mean, I went in and just didn't try to change anything. And I made a list of things that I did want to change, knowing that eventually these are going to be issues that'll have to be addressed. But at the same time, I didn't want to offend anyone, especially the coaches and staff that were caring for these facilities and cared about, and just say, hey, everything you're doing is wrong. We're just throwing it out.
Look, you dumbasses, you messed up everything. I'm going to fix it all.
And so, you kind of have to earn their respect and kind of develop a rapport with them. And luckily, some of them are my very best friends to this day.
The coaches.
Yeah. So some of them, like I said, are some of my best friends. We still talk on a regular basis. The baseball coach and I still talk regularly all the time. And one of the assistant softball coaches and I, they're at a different university now. So he'll text and ask me different things about their infield skin. And we text back and forth talking about hockey and other things all the time.
The important things.
So,
Let me ask you this. I mean,
we developed a good rapport.
These guys are not turf guys, but per se, right? I mean, these guys have been coaches, but they were managing the proper. I mean, that was part of their job, was they had to do the coaching, and then they had to come in and do your job. What was that? Was that transition easy, or were they of the opinion that, hey, I know how to do this better than you? Sounds like you had good rapport.
I think it was pretty easy. I think after interviewing and talking with them for a little bit, I think they realized I wasn't dumb. They might have seen that maybe my ideas and this grandiose expectation I had in my head of what we were going to be might have been a little crazy, but I think eventually we got there over the course of the 5+ years or 5-ish years that I was there.
So they didn't have any turf manager at all prior to you?
Nope, never.
So you must have gone in. I mean, what were some of the big changes that you were able to accomplish in those 5 years?
I want to say a lot of it was on the dirt side of things with baseball. And softball.
Oh, you're talking about the actual dirt.
I'm talking about the infield skin. So not the soil.
Yes, that's dirt. I'll give you dirt. I usually yell at people for saying dirt when I'm an agronomist. But now you're talking this. Yeah. I mean, that in baseball, that's the whole game, isn't it? Really, the skin.
The infield skin. So we worked on those areas. And then we just kind of worked on just the fertility on how we were gonna approach everything.
Yeah.
There was definitely a learning curve. My first year I got there, everything had already been overseeded with ryegrass. College baseball, you play pretty much from the end of January through May out there. And what
was the foundation grass? Was it common Bermuda?
At one point in time was 419.
Okay. That's what I meant to say, but yeah.
At this point in time, that's what it is. So that's what it was. Our first year we got there, it was already overseeded. Everything came up. So year 2 was the fall of 2013. I was like, we just need to dethatch and clean out the organic layer in this thing. I was like, who knows the last time it's been done? Yeah. And so I waited until fall practice was finished, which usually wrapped up, I want to say the end of October, beginning of November, around Thanksgiving. So I had somebody come in, a contractor. We verticut the heck out of it and tore into it. We had rows of just material that we pulled out. Afterwards, I went, overseeded everything, top dressed it, and watered it, and we had everything up and germinated. And the next thing you know, we had one of these winter events like we've had this week.
Right, the ice came.
Except then it was early. It was in December, so we just had seedlings up, and so the fields were basically ice for 3 or 4 days, and it absolutely destroyed all the seedlings. And
I would think
went through. They wore me out that year. Telling me, oh, you waited too long, and it was my first experience putting out any ryegrass overseeding in North Texas. And I learned at that point, it's a little different than it is 3 hours south of here in College Station, where down there we could get away with waiting on it, and up here we couldn't. So I learned year 1 up here that we'll do it at the end of September, and then we'll go back, and if we need to touch anything up, we'll do it all over again after they get done. But we're starting off by doing.
This was your classroom. You didn't teach. They didn't teach you that in school or experience anywhere else, but you learned it the hard way.
Absolutely.
It's probably the best lesson. You've never forgotten that, have you?
No, absolutely not. So every the first of every year when I pop up under for the year, I look at, especially with football here at TC, and then our baseball practice, I was like, all right, here's our dates. This is our window to get it done, where we're going to put the one in. And, we just got our 20 football schedule out, and it's, I've got a couple of times where I can get it done and get it in, and we're rolling with it. And we'll figure it out as we go. Always touch it up later.
Let's talk a little bit about the skin. I mean, how much experience did you actually have managing, the skin of a baseball field prior to getting there?
A lot. That was probably where I would say my expertise was.
Okay.
I did it on an everyday basis while I was at A&M, between baseball and softball, and then doing it at a minor league park on a regular level too. So that was the easy part. And it's become, I've had friends basically say that skin maintenance is more of an art form than it is a science.
It's definitely an
art. You just kind of have to get a feel for it and figure out exactly what you need on your area to get it done and get it perfect.
It's funny because I hear a lot, and I don't mean this to sound derogatory either, but baseball guys, they can really do the skin, but then the grass is kind of like, yeah, that's right. There's grass here too, but it's kind of funny. And I say that with all humor involved, but yeah, it is an art form, isn't it? I mean, it really is a matter of getting to know that environment. And then, is there a lot of confusion in products? And I don't want to get into any specific products on the skin, but are there technologies or any new things that have come down the line in terms of what you guys have to work with for managing and establishing the skin?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for the longest time, everybody just kind of considered as a 60-20-20 blend to be your ideal infield mix.
Which is what?
So with that being 60% sand, 20% silt, 20% clay. Okay. And then you could kind of manipulate the numbers a little bit up or down depending on the amount of care you can put in, the amount of moisture that you can handle putting in.
You're actually testing this physically so that you know what you're doing with?
Yep.
Or is this an established mix that you're bringing in?
Well, so that's where we kind of get into the new technologies of it, to where historically people would say, okay, this is what I've tested, but they pulled their material out of a pit. So it could be a 60-20-20 blend on the sample, but this side of the pit, your numbers might be a little bit off. Maybe you have, 64% silt over here. So some of the newer blends, they're actually blending it so you know exactly what you're getting the entire time, whether it have more silt, sand, or clay in there.
Yeah.
And so when you get this product that it is completely even throughout, and it makes it a lot easier to work with. You can handle more rain events.
That makes sense.
And get in and out of there a lot quicker.
Yeah. How much volume is in a baseball infield in the skin? How much volume of soil if you were to establish the whole field, how much would you have to bring in?
Oh geez.
A lot.
Somebody smarter than me could probably.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. That wasn't fair.
No, you're good. So ideally you're going to go at about 4 to 5 inches of that material compacted.
Okay.
So just recently, right after Thanksgiving, it kind of hurts to say, but they decided to pull out the grass on our foul territory of the baseball field. And so they put a synthetic material basically from wall to wall and foul territory. We already had some already. And it'll help us with the wear and tear of guys throwing on the lines and whatnot.
Yeah.
But when we did, we had to raise up the back around home plate from what was previously there. And so we brought in 33 tons of material just to adjust our baselines and home plate, and then bring the infield up about half an inch. So
and was that same kind of mix? Was that that same blend?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So and again, everything, and it's funny, we just interviewed Sam Farrow from Turf Diagnostics and talked physics for an hour, which is fascinating. But, it's one of those things that, quite honestly, being stuck on golf a lot, I don't even think about the physical aspects of what you guys are doing from a soil mix, but that makes perfect sense. And having it, like you said, it's all about drainage, and you're not growing grass on that area. So it's really not all that concerning. So once you're done with that mix, then what happens? You tamp it down, you compact it, and then you come back and you put your clays and other things on there. Yeah.
So ideally it's, it's all tilled together. So you have uniformity throughout. And then you get a roller and you roll it and tighten it up as much as you can. And then you just flood the heck out of it.
So you can just beat the crap out of this thing, right?
What's that? Oh yeah.
Just beating the crap out of it. I mean, you wouldn't do this if you were trying to build the outfield,
no, it's the complete opposite. Where you want to have soil structure,
right.
Where you're actually growing material. Here you want it compacted and tight.
Yeah, this is very foreign for me as an agronomist. I'm enjoying the conversation. How would you describe the art of that science?
It's all about the moisture content that you want in it. So an ideal infield is going to be, it's not going to chunk out. And it's basically going to be when a guy steps on it with their cleat, it goes in and it comes out and it leaves the cleat mark, and that's it. So think of kind of what a cork board, and you get a thumbtack and you put your thumbtack in, you pull it out. None of that cork board comes out. It goes right then. So the thought process is when that happens, you'll get a smooth roll on your baseball through that infield, and you won't get any crazy hops. If you get any hop, it's going to be true. Yeah. It's going to just be due to the top spin of a baseball. And so that way an infielder knows what's going to happen, and it's predictable when that ball comes to them. So the art being, you need to have the right amount of conditioner on top, which is either like an expanded shale or a calcined clay. And that's a top dressing that goes on top of that clay that keeps that smooth surface. And it also holds moisture to keep moisture in the dirt. And then you'll need to have the proper amount of in there too. So that way you can get that cleat in and cleat out. Perfect feel for it.
So it's the art is the art of the compaction of the skin. I mean, is that really what we're talking about?
Not even just compaction, because kind of once it gets compacted, it is what it is. Yeah. I would say it's the moisture content to it. And then at the same time as when guys practice and play on it, you will start to kind of get a little those divots and those cleat marks in there. So then it becomes the nail drag to kind of clean up those divots, and you kind of open it up at that point, kind of a top 1/4 inch layer, and then you want to get it smooth back out, and you want to get it rolled real tight again. You want to get moisture back in it, so that way it's bright, smooth all over again.
That makes sense. And then you're managing the moisture as well from the surface. So if you dry out, you guys, at any game, I mean, you see it even on professional baseball, they'll bring the hoses out just to, so that's all, again, part of so that's really the art is almost setting yourself up for moisture management.
Correct.
That makes sense. Let me go back to something you said earlier, because I'm always intrigued by this, but when you were discussing this with your father, that you were going to go into turf, is your dad still with us?
Yes.
What's he think now? He's got to be like,
he loves it. I mean, I think even back then he was giving me a hard time. Once he realized I'd kind of thought through it and what I was going to be doing, I think he realized that it was something that was right up my alley. Knowing that as a kid, my life revolved around sports, as most kids do, you kind of have this idea of what the greatest thing in the world is. And mine was, baseball, football, basketball, whatever. And so I think he was probably also relieved that I wasn't going to be a coach of any sort.
Right.
And so
like that.
Yeah. And so as I've progressed through my career, I mean, I would say I think he's pretty pleased with where we've ended up.
I would hope so. I mean, it's funny because
definitely proud.
Yeah, I would hope so as well. But, this is the perfect example of you followed your passion and you made your passion your career. And, I'm sure it's a lot easier going to work having a passion for it. Like you said, when you were on the golf course, you didn't have the passion for it. One of the things, we talk a lot about, and I've interviewed a lot of folks on the podcast here about, the labor force. And one of the vetting processes I think is very important for the guys on the golf course is to make sure that whoever you're interviewing loves the game of golf, because if you don't, you're gonna, and much like you love, baseball and the sports. I mean, it's when it's something that's passionate, it's not a job anymore. And right. Remember that when your son decides to go into something like that, and you wanted him to be a doctor, so you gotta remember this story when your boy comes to you in a handful of years from now and says, "Dad, I'm going to be this or that." But anyway, let's get over to TCU now. You've first of all, you've had a hell of a year, haven't you? This has been a lot of fun. I mean, I've watched a lot of TCU football this year, and it was fun, man. It was great watching you guys play. I'll tell you, I had a bunch of buddies over. We watched the Michigan TCU game. That was exceptional because we all hate Michigan. I'm sorry for folks that are Michigan fans, but that's just a sporting thing. But it was a great game, and it was a lot of fun. And and knowing you, it was kind of neat rooting for the team. And but more importantly, I watched a couple of games at your stadium, and man, field looks great. I mean, it's been, I've said this a couple times on our podcast and other things that I watch sporting events mostly for the fields. We watched the NFL playoffs, in Kansas City and Philly, who are both big clients of ours and friends, and they were just phenomenal fields. But from watching on TV, which is a limited viewpoint, obviously, but watching your field, it was fantastic. I mean, you guys, how was the year? I mean, tell me what it was like to be in TCU this year.
It was funny just because when I got here, I showed up. They were coming off of a Big 12 championship game appearance. I think they finished in the top 12 or 13 in 2017 before I got here. So expectations were pretty high. In 2018, my first year was rough. I think they finished 6-6, won the last game of the season just to go to a bowl game, and I think the joke was that it was one of the ugliest bowl games ever, and so it'll always go down in history because people will remember the Cheez-It Bowl with TCU's 10-7 double overtime win. And then the next year was kind of the same boat. They were 5-6 and lost that last game, so there was no bowl game that year. Kind of expectations weren't met. Next year was COVID. I think we finished 6-4. That year was crazy. We were going to a bowl game, and then we had to opt out because we didn't have enough players. And then we went through another 5-7 season, and then we had a coaching change. And so that was really the scariest part of the job, is that you kind of get to know the people that you're working with, for better or for worse, and you never know what the next person's going to come in. People are like, "Oh man, I bet it'll be easier for you now. You can do your job." And it's like, sometimes are you better off with
you don't
the
know
devil or the devil you don't. And it can be an adjustment, and it really was just not knowing what expectations are. And you go through spring ball, in the April of 2022, and everybody's playing on ryegrass, and everybody loves it. Practice fields are great, stadium's great, man, this is awesome. And then you have to transition.
Yeah.
And you're kind of at the point where college football is the year-round entity now, to where there's people coming in, there's recruits, there's camps, and you transition from ryegrass to Bermuda grass, and it's not pretty. Like, you can't even say it's not always pretty. It's never pretty.
Yeah, it's never pretty.
It's pretty much the worst time of year. Summer is by far the most stressful point that we have. And so, I was worried, okay, do we need to replace any of this? Just cut it out and put new sod in just so it'll look better, even though I've got a good feeling most of this will come back. What do we need to do? And the staff at the time was great. They're like, you do what you want to do. You know how to do this. The practice field's transition is a lot easier than the stadium, mainly just because the microclimate's different. We're not surrounded by 3 giant skyscrapers with no airflow.
Yeah.
It's wide open. We get airflow. We don't have to necessarily worry about disease. You get sun all day. During the summer, you're getting those 13, 14 hours of daylight out there. Makes it a lot easier. Yeah. So I think they were really happy with how that progressed. And then they saw during the summer, when we were able to work, we were able to do all of our cultural practices without anybody looking over our shoulders. They were really pleased. And so we went into the season with a really good stand of grass on the stadium. And, they opened up on the road and won, and you're just kind of like, okay, they beat Colorado. How good's Colorado? We don't really know. You come home, you play your first game. It's against, Tarleton State, who was in its first season of D1. We killed them. Still, You really don't know what's going to happen. We played SMU, beat them, and then, we played Oklahoma at home and beat them pretty good. And at that point, you're like, okay, maybe we're onto something. But then next week, then we got to go on the road and we got to do this. And, after we beat OU, everybody rushed the field. And then it's like, okay, having a football game on your stadium is rough. Having, 8,000 people all over the field afterwards is 20 times as rough. We get more damage from the field rush than anything else. Just beating down the rest of those plants.
Yeah, they just come in and dig it all up.
Yep. And it's just compaction
for history,
Yep. So one of the best things that we have is previously we didn't know if the team was going to practice on the stadium during the week. Usually it would be Sunday nights. The previous coaching staff would use Sunday nights to practice. We don't have lights on the practice fields. So instead of going in the indoor, they'd come on the stadium. Well, we didn't know if we could start our recovery process right after the game or if we needed to wait till Monday morning. So coming into this year, we knew that we could start that recovery process as soon as the game was over. So game's over with. We finally get everybody off. We pick all the blankets up. We get TV out. And we can run a verticutter over it to kind of clean some material out. And we know we can start throwing our post recovery. So we would go, and our post game routine would be clean it up, blow it off, verticut, and then we're throwing 3-3-3 and Renovate Plus as soon as the game's over with.
Yeah.
And then we'll throw our granular after that. And then
granular fertilizer, something to push the grass. Yeah.
Yep. Weather. And a lot of it just kind of depends on what the next week. Sometimes we'd throw the 8-2-2 at it. Sometimes we'd throw like a 8-18, depending on how quick we needed something to really pop.
So when are you doing? Are you doing this Saturday afternoon or are you doing this Sunday morning?
This would be Saturday afternoon.
Oh, so you're doing it right as everybody's off. You're right back into it and working through the night, I'm assuming.
Yep. And usually we have it down to where it's about a 2 to 3 hour post game, depending on how much we're doing.
Wow. That sounds like a lot of work for a couple hours.
It is. But my goal is to just let all the guys not have to come in on Sunday. We already worked all week for prep. You're there Saturday. We're there, 6 hours before the game starts. We're there for the game. They would rather just stay, get everything done, and not have to come in on Sunday. I would rather stay and not have to come in on Sunday because I already lost Saturday with the family. I want to be at home on Sunday. And, depending on what the next week looks like, if it's early in the season and we don't have a back-to-back, I've usually got 25 tons of sand coming. We'll probably put about 15 of that out, top dress everything.
When is the sand going out? What day?
Monday. So this will go out Monday. So if we've got, 13, 14 days between games, so that Monday it's going down. And then we've got knife tines going on top of it. We're bayonet tining it, opening it up, trying to decompact it after everybody's been down there, and letting it breathe, and then repairing it for the next one.
Wow.
Now, once we hit, I believe it was the OU game, I think as soon as that one was over with, we were lucky that it was 11 a.m. kick. 2 weeks later was our next game, but we went overseeded as soon as that game was over with. So we did our verticut, we did a uni rake, we blew it, we cleaned everything up, and then we threw, our 12 pounds per thousand of ryegrass out there because we wanted to get it in and get it up that day. Yeah. So we did all of that, went out. It was all watered in. Monday we came, we top dressed it on Monday. So we had the water off for a few hours, knife tined it in, and then we just ran water. I would say, I think that Thursday was when I saw the first seedlings start to pop. And then by Sunday, we had an okay stand. And then Tuesday of the following week, so what is this, 10 days later, we're mowing it. And that Wednesday, we're getting ready for our next game. And we had a back-to-back. So we beat, I want to say, Oklahoma State, I think it was, 2 weeks after that OU game. Yeah. They were a top 10 team at the time, beat them, another field rush. And then we have all those seedlings were basically wiped out.
And then you go back to back, so you couldn't do that whole process over again.
Nope. So all we did, we had pre-germinated seed ready to go.
Good.
I think we probably did 200 pounds. So 4 bags that we had ready to go, and we threw it, and we just threw it by hand. Threw a few more.
Really? You're doing this by hand?
We threw that by hand just because I don't have a great process for drying it out, so that way we can throw it in a broadcaster. So,
Now that you're doing the same thing after that Oklahoma State game, you still came in after the game and you did the verticutting, you dropped renovate, you dropped micro replenish.
Yeah, we didn't. I don't think we did any of the verticutting. I think most of it was we just got the big blower, Buffalo blower, Pro Force, whatever, blew it all off. I don't think we verticut. I didn't want to get too aggressive with it, knowing that 6 days later we were playing again.
Back
to State. And then once we beat OSU, I knew we had a good chance of being.
When did you start getting ranked in the top 10 after OSU?
I think beating Oklahoma got us in the top 25. I would say it was either OSU or K-State that got us that put us in the top 10.
Okay.
And with every win, you kind of get more and more visibility.
Right, exactly. And now you're on stage.
And exactly. You've got the sky cam, every little thing shows, and
you gotta hate the sky cam, especially after back-to-backs.
The sky cam's not my favorite. It's cool, but then it takes a while to set it up and take it down, and they have to take it down smack dab in the middle of the field. So we're trying to get everything done to get out of there.
Yeah, so
you just kind of have to sit and wait and twiddle your thumbs.
Oh God! And are they messing up the field?
No, not really. They've got just like a little cart that they kind of push out on four wheels. It's not heavy. It's really not that bad. Um,
How
so
old is that?
most
How
people
old
good.
is that stadium?
So the stadium itself was renovated in 2012, and our west side, which is the one that you don't see on television, that has the press box, was all built in 2012. The main lower bowl it's old. It's probably 80 years old,
Yeah.
I want to say. Um, so renovated that, and then we put a club and suite level on the east side. That construction started in 18 and it wrapped up in 2020. And that's our shade structure, if you will.
It's a neat
So
stadium. I mean, it's actually, it feels really big because you have all
yeah,
that, stuff behind it. I think we did a seminar in the back room back there one
yep,
day.
yep,
And
we did.
and it didn't even feel like we were on the stadium itself. It was that big.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it holds 45,000, which is crazy. I mean, crazy you think about it. Our undergraduate enrollment's right around 10, 11,000.
Right.
Um, and our living alumni base could all fit in either, the Texas A&M or the University of Texas or like the Oklahoma stadiums and not even fill them up. So all those stadiums hold over 100,000 people,
Yeah.
and we don't
Big.
necessarily have 100,000 living alumni. So 45,000 seat stadium is pretty good for such a small school as our
Right.
community is really takes over and really enjoys
Is that who that's the
adopting
fan
the team.
base is not
Yeah,
just the alumni and students, but you got a lot
yeah,
of
yep,
folks from the whole area, I'm sure,
exactly,
coming in there.
exactly.
How old is the field itself?
So the actual field and the drainage system was built when the stadium was redone. So that was done in 2012.
Well,
It's
okay.
419. And then in 2018, when I was here, a full renovation was done on the practice fields, and that was when we first met. And so after that renovation was done, Coach loved the Tip Tough Bermuda we had so much that we decided after that season we were putting it in the stadium. So the spring summer of 2019, we
Yeah.
put Tip Tough in the
Yeah.
stadium.
And you like
And
it, I
so
assume.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's been really good for us. Yes.
Yeah, we talk a lot about. I love the grass. I mean, I see it over at FC Dallas and
Yep.
those stadiums, and it seems like a lot of folks in Texas are in love with Tiff Tough, even though it's a
Yeah.
silly name. But it's a great grass for
Right.
for sports because it really is pretty dense and the color is phenomenal.
Yes. As we get into the summer months and we can get it tighter and we can use, get our Primo apps out there.
Right.
And we hit it, like every 2 weeks with the 555, and we use a
Yeah.
powdered iron supplement also with that. And man, it gets dark and it gets
It gets
lush.
dark
And
and yeah,
it's
it's
beautiful.
really nice about. Yeah, it really
Yep.
is.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, usually it holds its color pretty well. I want to say we went through probably 3 or 4 good frosts before we went dormant this fall. So I was pretty pleased with that.
Yeah. When did it go dormant in your neighborhood? How long did it keep
Oh
its color?
geez,
Thanksgiving?
we were probably into November this year. I mean,
Okay,
we've had
good.
it as early as Halloween. Some
Oh,
years, I
good.
think in 19 we had some really hard freezes early.
Yeah.
So right around Halloween where we kind of lost some stuff, and we'll manipulate it. Some areas we'll let it go dormant. Our soccer field we don't overseed at all, and so we'll manipulate it with grow blankets and some pigments to try to keep it going through the soccer season and as late as they'll go. But I do my best to not overseed it. That way we can just keep it as clean as we possibly can this time of year,
Yeah.
not having to worry about POA or anything else to that nature. And transition, we don't have to worry about it either.
And excuse me for asking, but when did the Tiff Tough come in? I know.
So we put Tiff Tough on the stadium in 19.
In
They
19.
they
Okay.
they renovated the soccer field before I got here, which was the summer of 27. The first field with Tiff Tough on it at TCU.
Yeah.
And from there they did the practice fields. It was already spec'd at Tiff Tough when I came in the stadium at 19.
What's your cutting height on
And
the
then
stadium?
we'll go anywhere between half an inch to 5/8
Okay.
uh, on the Tiff Tuff. We'll get up to 3/4 on the ryegrass later in the year.
Okay.
Like I said, we usually host a bowl game that's anywhere from late December to early January, and so um, we'll raise the height of the ryegrass on that up. And so once we get past this frost, this freeze that we're in right now, we'll start cutting it back down and start trying to get
Right.
little oomph going out of the Tiff Tuff.
And Tiff Tuff stands pretty strong at half an inch. I mean, I know on the golf course side, when they try to bring it down, it's not as strong as some of the other Bermudas, but on sports fields, man, at a half an inch, it's just a great grass.
Yeah. Yep, we love it during the summer. We're working in a really small rate of primo every 2 weeks just to kind of keep it down there. I've still haven't dialed it in perfectly and figured out exactly what I like with it yet. A lot of that also has to do transition to where it takes a while to get everything back and up and full coverage before we start treating it again.
Right.
And you mentioned some of your other students and clients, and I talked to Travis Hogan before the season. I was like picking his brain. Hey, what do y'all do here? What do you, what's great about the sports field industry is you can just send somebody a message on Twitter that you've never even met before, and they know somebody else, and they're like, okay. And so next thing you know, had a phone call, and boom, we
it's a small community. And I'll tell you, the sports turf guys are great. I actually, and I know we're recording this early, but when the NFC championships were over, I texted both Tony and Travis, who are good friends, and I said, "Well, how's this going to work out?" And they're like thrilled for each other. I mean, it's such a nice community.
It's awesome.
It really is a nice community. But is that field used for anything other than football during the season?
Not during the season. So during the season, we hit August. We usually have images out there, and then we just use it for games. We'll dress it up a little bit for recruiting. That's probably the biggest pain is the extra paint that we have to put out there, and the negative aspect that has. But luckily, with playing in the Big 12 championship game and then the national title, we were busy practicing and getting ready for football games where we didn't have as many of those events. And December 22nd, we had the Armed Forces Bowl that we hosted. So
that's right. Yeah.
Where most, college programs wrapping up as soon as Thanksgiving's done. We played the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and that Monday, it's okay. We've got, 20 days until we got to have it ready by the 20th. What do we need to do? And so it's immediate. Start getting ready for that. It's a little more seed, a little more top dressing, getting everything going, and then here we go. We get the bowl game, and then as soon as it's over, we start getting ready for spring. But when it was over this year and it was, a negative 10-degree wind chill and it was 9 degrees, we just picked up the tarps and blankets and got the heck out of there. We went back a week later to do what we needed to do.
Were they practicing during between the bowl game? I mean, were they on that field?
No, they'll either go to the practice fields or they'll go inside depending on what the weather is. So the team now, they do all their practicing in the mornings. And so they'll usually practice from 6:30, 7 o'clock till 10 o'clock in the morning, which was new for us. I was always used to, but it's kind of nice because they get in, they get out, we can clean it up, we can mow it, we can spray, we can, do whatever we need to do. We need to fertilize and water, we can cut it on.
Right.
The only downside is that they are out there, and as it gets later in the year, there's more moisture in the ground, there's a dew on top even after we drag it, and it will wear a lot quicker than it would if we were to play on the afternoons. But all of that's done upstairs or in the indoor.
What's happening on that field on off season?
It could be, any number of things. Nothing too aggressive. Heck, right now, school is closed, so there's probably kids down there playing on it, thinking it was snowy because it's pretty much open. It's the most open stadium in the
it's very open. Actually, it's very open. Funny how it is. It's like, oh, look, there's the stadium right there.
Yeah, there's no closing it off now. But
you're not getting the Rolling Stones or Taylor Swift in there. Okay, so you're not getting any of the big events.
No, we've had one concert out there during COVID, and it was because they normally have it in what we call the campus commons, and they were trying to socially distance people. So we had one concert down there that kind of wrecked one end zone, but our access is so limited with such a steep ramp that most people don't really want to go down there. And then also just being in the DFW, there's so many other places to have concerts that stadium just isn't one of them. So if we have any other events, it's football events. We'll have flag football games down there, flag football tournament, camps, other football events is what we'll have down there.
Oh, you do have camps on that field?
Yes. So they'll do what's basically, they call it a mega camp. And they'll bring in 2,000, 2,200 kids over the course of Saturday and Sunday. they'll use the stadium, the indoor facility, and our 2 practice fields, and they're just running on it constantly.
Just beating the crap out of it.
Yeah, it was. I didn't really know what to expect. I the worst. I kind of got it when we in June, but once that camp was over with, they were pretty much done, and so we went full throttle after that. They're done, and man, we're pulling cores, we're verticutting, we're rolling it, and we're just getting after it after that. And they did a really good job of moving groups around, so that way.
Good. I was going to ask you about that because that's a big problem in those camps. They stay in one spot and just rip the daylights out of it.
Yep. So I think one position group last year on the practice fields didn't move, and it took
great
of top dressing and smooth it over to kind of get those areas back. But other than that, the rest of them were awesome. They did a really good job. We have a really good rapport, I feel like, with the staff.
Let's talk about the rest of your campus. You must have a lot of other stuff that you're responsible for. I think I read on your website there's 302 acres on the campus.
Yep. So
are you responsible for campus areas?
No.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yep. So we don't work for athletics. We're in the facilities side, formerly known as the physical plant, and the grounds operation. So I have myself, I have 2 assistants, and then 6 full-time employees, and 1 part-time that we'll usually bring in as an intern during the summer, that work just for us. And so we've got the 3 football fields, the soccer facility, baseball, track, and then 2, let's call it 3.5 acre intramural fields, and then the common areas around those. So we do have, some hollies, some ligustrums, some crepe myrtles and stuff around those areas that we'll take care of. But the majority of everything that we do is on the athletics side. And the rest of our department, I think there's about 50 to 55 people total. So subtract our 9 that take care of the rest of the campus grounds. And our grounds director does an awesome job. He came to us from the University of North Texas, I would say about 1.5 years ago, and hit the ground running because between him and his predecessor, who had been here for probably 30 years, we had a decent sized gap where we didn't have anybody. And so that kind of just fell on my shoulders. And it's kind of like golf is not my passion. And I was like, hey, I told the supervisors on campus, you guys know what you're doing. If you have any problems, ask me. I said, I'm not going to tell you how to do your job because I don't know how to do it.
Right. Smart man.
Trees, I don't know anything about shrubs. I was like, I grow grass. And
it's only this tall. So, I don't know anything taller than that.
Right. And so we, we kind of I kind of kept my head down and did what I knew how to do. And we kind of roll with that. But yeah, our grounds are beautiful. They do an awesome job. I think the Princeton Review is constantly ranked.
Number 3.
We're constantly ranked. Yeah. Yeah. So we're number 3 now. Yeah. So it's
I just looked it up on your website. Yeah, it's great. It's and it's funny because I work with a lot of university staffs on grounds, and it's becoming such a powerful recruiting tool to have quality grounds. And I've said this many times. When my son was looking at colleges, I remember going around in some of these places and looking. Of course, I'm incredibly biased, but looking at some of these schools, and man, they're just. I don't want to send my kid there. That's crap. It's dirt and scrubby little landscape plants and. But a place like yours, man, I remember walking around there, and I was saying it to the guys we're with. It's just, man, the property is just beautiful. I'd send my kid here.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of a front porch to the university, where I always liken the football field aspect to where we're on television, and people's first introduction into a university is through their living room TV. Right. You get on campus. And that's the first thing people see. It's like, well, if they take care of campus and they take pride in picking up trash and leaves and just having it beautiful, they're definitely going to take care of my kid.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly what, and a lot of presidents are starting to really buy into that theory. And it really does make a lot of sense, which is really important. Do you work closely agronomically with the grounds management team? Are you guys kind of doing similar programming, or are you doing yours and they're doing theirs?
I wouldn't say it's similar programming, mainly just because ours is so much more intense.
You're right.
With the grounds, you can kind of come up with a plan, right? A yearly plan. Hey, this is what we're going to do. You don't have to be as, I don't want to say proactive as we do. But we're more nitrogen into the fields than they are. Just mainly because hey, between the hashes we've got to regenerate growth, and
you
maintaining grass at half an inch to 0.625 5 inches is a lot different than maintaining Bermuda grass at 2 inches.
Right, right.
And so, we talk pre-emergent plans, we talk, post-emergent plans. I pick his brain on the areas that, hey, over on this Asian jasmine outside of the practice field, what's the best thing to do here? And we collaborate. But I wouldn't say like, our plans aren't anywhere close to being the same. They're not aerating the grounds, like we are. I'm doing it as much as I can. They're like, okay, can we open it up once a year?
Right. Which is probably enough. Although there's probably some grounds that get pretty compacted with
correct
around walking and all that kind of stuff. But
so issues like that, we definitely collaborate on those kind of things. Hey, what kind of aeration should I do here? Do you think this will be aggressive enough? How quick will it come back? And we bounce ideas off each other all the time.
Let me ask you some of your agronomic things, and I'm gonna dance here because I don't want this to be self-serving, and I don't want it to be a commercial. But you've definitely changed some of your agronomics, certainly since you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit. I mean, was that an easy transition? I mean, you're doing a little bit more carbon. You're seeing some of the results. I mean, where would you say you are these days from from your programming agronomically?
I would say when I got here, I was probably more reactionary than proactive. If that makes sense.
Yeah, very good. I love it.
When I got here, we were building, the sand-based 100% USGA practice.
Yeah.
Had no organic matter content built into it. I was kind of like, okay, didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And so from then, it was okay, let's work material into it pre-plant. And we did the Renovate Plus, we did the 333. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how many tons we put in. I remember it was a good amount, and we worked some other materials in there as well too. We worked some biochars in there, and just anything that we could to retain moisture, to give the root zones, once we did root, something to grab onto, to put some good fungi in the ground, so that way we could just start to develop, for lack of a better word, that community in the soil, instead of it just being a beach underneath there.
Yeah, sterile environment.
Yep. And so it's one of those things I feel like you don't necessarily recognize in year one, but once you hit year two and that program has really been rolling, starting to kind of get that humic layer in there, you can start to see the good results. Where I don't know if there's anything that can save the fields from the wear and tear of the grass blades getting worn like they do, but I think the regeneration process, the new growth from the crowns of the plant has definitely helped. We've got a strong root system all over, and I think it didn't take long. I remember in year one on the practice fields, we had to dig up one of our quick coupler lines, and we already had roots, big old fatties growing into our gravel layer, which is 12 inches deep. And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's only been a month and a half. And
you're
so
sounding an awful lot like a soils guy now, Andrew. I'm a little worried about this.
Really, that's what it is. It's, I live and breathe for our aeration, our cultural practices, and filling in those holes with everything good that we possibly can. Knowing that the majority of our hay is made from June and July, until we get to August. And then it's just kind of maintenance after that. It's kind of just keep it up. But everything is done those 3 months as we just feed the soil.
Yeah. Was that a hard transition? I mean, you came from a fairly conventional background, and I'm always curious when somebody kind of starts to transition into more of a soils focus. Was that difficult for you? Did you, were you skeptical?
I don't think so.
Or did we just talk you into it and you believed it for some silly reason?
It's not even just that. I mean, it goes back to, your academic side when you learn about soils and your soil science, and you think we're trying to grow grass and sand, which has little to no nutritional holding power.
Right. There's nothing there.
There's nothing there. There's no CEC there to hold on to anything. It's like, okay, we've got a bunch of calcium in here that's not plain available. What else do we have to go with?
Nothing.
And so at that point, it's, I realized we could go one of two ways. We could either go heavy on synthetic fertilizers to push growth. We could go heavy on organics and carbon-based fertility that will sit there and work itself for a while, and we could go all, or we could go just straight foliars. And so I decided, why don't we just have a mixture of everything?
Which
We can
makes
just do a
sense,
little
right?
bit of all of it.
Yeah, especially on a
And
football field. Like you said, you got to grow grass.
right, exactly. Whereas, and it's different to where we have different ways of managing like our soccer field from our football field.
Of course.
When you have, 300-pound men constantly in the same place grinding on the ground, as opposed to, a 130-pound woman, 120-pound woman running around, and they're just trying to take care of their bodies and avoid the same spots over and over. It's different to care for them.
Well said. Yeah.
To where, we kind of coast through soccer season. We'll go, and every couple of years now, I think they're on the Phrasmo trend. We did it once, they loved it. Now we're just going to keep rolling with that, and we'll just keep aerating as much as we can and pumping it. We usually just feed it with 5-4-5 of a granular, and the only time it really gets any kind of synthetic is in our pre-emergent practice. But once we're filled in and we're not aerating as much, then we just stay on like a foliar diet every couple of weeks, and then every 6 weeks it'll get a granular dose, and that keeps it happy.
We've been preaching this for a long time, my friend. I think you know that. But what you're doing with that carbon base is you're constantly building a release of nitrogen. So
right.
When you're trying to recover and establish seedling, having that base and then it gives you complete flexibility and freedom to push whatever you need to push over the top. And you're the only one that can make that calls. What's the weather like? What's the season like? What's going on? How far do we have to push? And you've done it very, very well. I hate to say this, but we just ran out of an hour. So I told you it was going to be fast and furious.
Yeah, it was quick.
I appreciate you joining us. It's always a pleasure. I'm sorry we missed you at STMA, but hopefully we'll make plans next year. I'm sure I'll be down, maybe hopefully not in the heat of the summer, but because you guys get bloody hot down there, and now you got ice. So it's
the summer's the perfect time, because then we can just go grab lunch and stay inside as much as we can.
And I can walk out and look. Let me ask you this before we close, but has the ice that you are battling this week, has it caused any problems on the fields?
I don't know. We'll see.
You don't know yet?
I don't know yet.
Oh, you're at home with the Legos right now. Yeah.
I'm at home. As soon as we get done, I'm going to hop in the shower and I'm going to head up there. But, actually, in my experience, I think that the ice serves as an insulator.
Yeah.
Where, the Bermuda grass is dormant. It's fine. The ryegrass might have taken a beating, but I learned when we had the football game when it was 10 degrees, and it was as cold as it's ever been. We had nothing on top, no buffer, and we actually took a big step back at that point. And the stadium still hasn't fully recovered because those plants were frozen and had a football game on it. And hey, you crush a lot of plants.
Yeah, exactly. Frozen plants that get walked on get pretty beat up, don't they?
Yes.
Yep. And there's no silver bullet for that one.
No, they just kind of have to regenerate from the crown and come back.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I'm also like, if they don't, well, then we're one step ahead towards Bermuda grass transition. So
you're getting a natural Mother Nature's doing your transition for you.
Absolutely.
A little ahead of time, perhaps, but we'll see.
Yep. We'll know in the next 3 or 4 weeks what we're looking at.
Well, listen, my friend, you had a hell of a season this year. I hope you guys are back on top again next year, because it was fun watching. I love watching the little schools go up against the big ones, and I was rooting for you all the way through. So
the bar's high now, so there's only one way to go, and
that's right. You got to come back to that. Is the team coming back? Are you going to have a lot of?
Yeah, I mean, it's college athletics. You have a lot of turnover, but we have a lot of guys coming back. So I didn't know what to expect this year. I think it's kind of thing now, is we'll see as we get there next year. Hopefully we can get more people off guard.
Right. That would be great. And hopefully the end of it works out a little bit better than this year. But he had a hell of a season. And again, I thank you for all your support. Thank you for coming on the podcast with us, and have a wonderful season and enjoy it. Hopefully the ice hasn't killed you.
We'll be good. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
And that is the EarthWorks podcast. Please join us next week. We'll have somebody else as entertaining, I hope, if possible. And if you haven't been a subscriber, please subscribe so you can get some heads up as to who we might have on our podcast coming down the road. And thank you very much. And again, Andrew, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.